right, well, we'll get started in a minute or so, but I'll just go over the housekeeping notes first. Just a reminder to please silence your phones, and photography is permitted, and all of the speakers today are fine with photography, and that there will be a recording available on the meeting website following the meeting. So welcome everybody to So Happy Together, a look inside industry core partnerships. But first we have a sponsor talk from Cooper from Parse Biosciences. And Cooper has been with Parse for 2 years and is in technical sales and covers the central region. Is that correct? All right, great. And then so take it away, Cooper.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name's Cooper. I am the technical sales manager, as Kaye just mentioned, for the Central U.S. And today I'm going to teach you a little bit about Parse Biosciences. So some of you may know more than others, but I'm going to start with just a high-level approach and give you some insight to how we're different to some other technologies out there. And then we've got some exciting stuff coming up in the coming months that I'm happy to share as well. So taking a step back and kind of looking at Parse as a whole, we started in 2018. Our two co-founders came out of the University of Washington, and it took 3 years to really optimize these kits and make them commercially ready to roll. So in 2021, we came out with our first kit, and since then it's been almost 3 years, and we're already in 1,800 labs globally, and people are really excited about the scale and the throughput that we can bring to these single-cell workflows. As far as the EverCode technology itself, we have 3 different flavors, I like to call it. Essentially, it's 3 different kit sizes. Each kit has a total output of cells, and you can multiplex however many samples you want on that kit up to a certain number that you'll see right below the cell number there. So, for example, with our whole transcriptome WT kit, we call it our 100,000 cell kit. You can put up to 48 samples. Many people will often put something like 10 samples on that kit because it gives you about 10,000 cells per sample. So we've got our 10,000 cell mini kit, which is designed as a pilot run. We've got our WT kit, which is kind of that middle ground where you're going to start seeing some cost savings as well. And then our WT Mega, which is the true high throughput, million cell kit, 96 samples on a single run. Today, mostly I'll be talking about whole transcriptome. But we do have other products that are out and available, including TCR profiling, pooled CRISPR screens, and targeted gene panels. And we've got some other stuff that will be coming down the pipeline very soon. As far as the major differentiators when it comes to single cell and how we differentiate ourselves from the other market players, one is that scalability I just mentioned. So we can target up to 1 million cells or nuclei or 96 samples in a single run. Another thing is there's no instrument required. So really low throughput and cost for trying this out and getting it into the hands of people and making single cell more accessible. If you buy a Parse kit, you could essentially run it the next week with the reagents that we send over. Another aspect of this is data quality. People often think as you scale up and bring costs down, you can compromise data, and that's not the case. So we see we're detecting more genes and transcripts per cell than a lot of other technologies out there, as well as eliminating doublets and removing some of that ambient RNA noise. And then lastly, a major benefit of our workflow is fixation. So with cores in particular, it can be very beneficial because you can fix and store your samples for up to 6 months. So end users and researchers can collect their samples, create the single cell suspension, fix those, and send them all out to the core for barcoding, library prep, and sequencing whenever they're ready to actually run the experiment. Kind of segueing into that, the high-level model of how Parse works, you'll start with that fixation. And again, these are sold separately so those end users can fix and store their samples. And then if they'd like to send it out to cores that are running Parse as a service, they would run the barcoding, library prep, sequencing, and data analysis will be available to both the core and the end user. We are an Illumina-based platform, but we're sequencing agnostic. We can work with all different sequencers, PacBio, Oxford Nanopore, and all the others that are listed down below there. Diving into a little bit more of the details and how the technology works and differs from droplet-based method. You start with the single cell suspension. You're going to fix and permeabilize those cells. What that allows for is these barcodes and enzymes to enter the cell use the cell itself as the container for the reaction. So as opposed to physically isolating the cells in an oil droplet, you'll actually use the cell itself. But at this point, we have millions of fixed permeabilized cells. We need to get to a single cell resolution without a microfluidic instrument. So the way we're going to do that is combinatorial barcoding. So what you have here is a 96 well plate. Each well in this plate contains a barcode unique to that well only. So you're going to evenly distribute the millions of fixed permeabilized cells across all 96 wells. And what you can see in that blue well there is all of the thousands of cells in that blue well will receive blue barcode 1. So now all the cells have one barcode, but many have the same barcode. So not quite single cell resolution yet. So what we do is we pool all of the wells together, mix it up into one giant population, and then you repartition into another 96 well barcoded plate. So now you can see on that gold well, all of those cells came from a different well on the previous plate, and they're all receiving gold barcode 2. So you can start to appreciate the different pathways that these cells are going to travel through each of these 4 steps. So you're going to repeat that process, pool, repartition onto another barcoded plate, and then one last pooling step into 16 sublibraries. So in the end, there are 14 million unique pathways that the cells can travel through, which gives us the confidence to say you can capture 1 million uniquely identified cells via that combination of 4 barcodes. I know I ran through that pretty fast, but I do only have 10 minutes. So if you do want more explanation on that or clarification, I'm happy to walk through that and how we can multiplex at our booth later today. Shifting gears here a little bit, I do want to talk about how we're able to kind of characterize heterogeneous samples and look at some of these more rare cell types by analyzing more cells per sample. So what we have here and what you'll see on the UMAP over to the left is a PBMC study on our WT mega kit, so a million cell kit. And we had 12 PBMC samples. So if you do the math, million cells divided by 12 samples, you're at about 80,000 cells per sample. And you can see these are obviously very diverse samples in themselves. You can see the different cell populations, some more abundant than others. And then at the very top of the bar graph there, you'll see all the rare cell populations that you're able to identify bioinformatically by scaling up the number of cells. So zooming in on a couple of those rare cell populations, you'll find the number of cells with an 80,000 cell per sample run, you're seeing about 100 to a couple hundred cells per sample, which gives us enough significance to actually uniquely identify these rare cell populations. But what happens is when you downsample to that standard 10,000 cells per sample, you lose a lot of that resolution. You're getting somewhere along the lines of 0 to 14 cells per sample, which is really not enough to significantly characterize some of these rare cell populations. So the big takeaway here is maybe reconsidering if you are working with a heterogeneous sample, these WT mega kits can really help you scale up that experiment and run more cells per sample if the research allows. Okay, a couple other exciting items I wanted to talk about today is some of the new stuff we've got coming. So we just launched our V3 chemistry as of about a month ago now. So it's up and running, and if you do purchase a parse kit, it will be the V3. Some of the major improvements that we've made with these kits are really based on the feedback from academic cores and end users themselves, and the feedback being that we want a shorter, more streamlined workflow. So that's what we did. So we've changed the workflow from about a 3-day workflow to a 2-day workflow, and realistically, people are running these 2-day workflows in 3 half days. So it gives you more flexibility as a core to run people's samples and more stopping points. It's also more streamlined in the sense of there's much less pipetting involved. Second here is the scalability with the fixations. So we're now able to fix 1 to 96 samples in a plate-based fixation workflow in 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And then the last thing is consistent data improvement. So we're seeing more sensitivity, higher sensitivity, more genes and transcripts per cell with the version 3. Along the same lines of V3, we just launched an automation collaboration with Integra and their Assist Plus. We're really excited about this, and people seem to be very excited about it as well, because it's basically, especially when thinking about running parse as a service, we want this thing to be as efficient as possible, right? So this is a plug-and-play workflow where if you have an Assist Plus or if you want to purchase an Assist Plus, we're going to reduce the hands-on time by 75–80%. Right now, the automation is the barcoding step where I talked about the multi-channel pipetting. we do have plans to kind of further apply the automation to both fixation and library preparation. And that's all going to be included in the purchase bundle here. So if you are interested in talking about automation, you are more than welcome to stop by our booth or Integra's booth, and they'll give you more information on this bundle. And then the last slide here, I just want to highlight a brand new press release that we had this morning on our HTS automation capabilities. So we launched a collaboration with Hamilton, OpenTrons, STP, and we're here to support you on your larger throughput, high throughput screening initiatives for maybe the higher throughput options and being able to fully automate the entire process in a fully automated liquid handler. So a lot of exciting things to come. And if you want to chat about automation, the V3, or any single cell in general, feel free to stop by our booth, and thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Cooper, and thank you, Parse. Okay, and then you can find Cooper at his booth later if you have any questions about that. So I want to get started on our panel discussion. So today what I'd like to do is for each of us, the four of us, to spend 5 to 10 minutes just introducing ourselves so that you can see which perspective we're bringing to the table. And then I hope that we can have an open discussion, answer any questions, or talk about the things that might concern you or that you might be interested in learning more about. So with that in mind, I'm going to try to keep us each to under 10 minutes. So do your best, everybody. Okay. All right. So I'll start with myself since I'm already up here. I'm Kaye, and I am the director of the Center for Advanced Light Microscopy and Endoscopy at the University of Rochester Medical Center. So I think I bring kind of the middle-ish perspective to this. So the University of Rochester. I work at the medical center, which is separate than the undergraduate campus. And according to our website, we have about 3,000 people that are dedicated to research at our university and about 500 labs, individual labs working. So if you kind of start to do the math, they're small labs at our institution, a lot of them. And the CALMN falls under CART, which is the Center for Advanced Research Technology, which is the umbrella center that covers 9 of the 9 SRLs that are available at the medical center. So that's kind of like what our structure is, operating structure. So in my facility, we have about 80 research groups that use us and 150 individual users. Again, you can see that we're not getting 30 people from one lab using our facility. It's a lot of small labs using us for small projects. We have about 10 instruments, 9 or 10 instruments, and we use the reservation, access control, and usage tracking is all done through our PPMS software by Stratacore. So there's 3 team members total, so it's me and my 2 other people I had to put their pictures up here so they could be equally embarrassed. These are our instruments that we have. So you can see we have a wide range of instruments. We have a couple of That was real fun. Okay. I thought that was my heart that just stopped or something. Okay. So we have a wide range of instruments. We have laser scanning confocals. We have a multiphoton. We have a very basic Keyon system that anybody can use. We have recently added a light sheet microscope to our facility, and we have a super resolution microscope. And so our model is that we train everybody to use the instruments themselves so that they can become independent and hopefully understand and learn more about their projects, since a lot of them are graduate students that we're working with. And so even at this kind of size facility, I've had several types of company relationships. So we've been a demo site for different companies. We've done some equipment testing. We've been their guinea pigs when they're trying to roll out something that's new, just to see how people react to it, or if it's a product that nobody really has experience with, to get at least some researchers that have at least tried the product. We've partnered with companies to bring in seminars or to do sort of introduce new products to to people, and then also serving as a reference, just if someone else is looking to buy similar equipment, or if they want to talk about like how we've installed equipment or how we've moved forward with something. And one thing that I didn't put on here, we've also offered sort of as a revenue stream where people can just, where companies can come to us and pay to use our equipment as well, so that they don't have, a lot of smaller companies don't have the money for these big microscopes, but they need a couple confocal images or for whatever reason. And so we've done a lot of that as well. So yeah, that's me. So next up, Peter from ABR Optics will tell you a little bit about himself.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. So yeah, my name is Peter Brunt from ABR Optics, and it's like Kaye, I'm going to give you a little bit of context about who ABR Optics are, how we operate with different groups and different researchers across the US. So firstly, a little bit about ABR. So we were founded in 2016, primarily to support SEMROC optical filters for research, for the research industry across the US and Canada. We're a technical distributor, so we're a team of scientifically trained people who work with people to pair them with the technologies that we work with. So we partner with specific companies, and then we're a technical sales channel, effectively. So we started with SEMROC, but we've since branched out quite a bit. This is just some of the companies we work with. We also work with probably a couple of dozen different companies worldwide on a less formal basis, really just to kind of give us reach for certain applications. We're based in Rochester, New York, and we've collaborated with Kaye in the past. And as a company, as I mentioned, we work with scientifically trained individuals, so all of our sales staff are scientifically trained, and we have a very simple ethos. We're about people and science in that order, so we care about people's research goals, and ultimately the people behind them, right? You can't do science without people, so we have to really care about what people's goals are and then work with them from there. So a bit about me. As I said, my name is Peter Brunt. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director at ABR. I'm also the technical lead there. My original background was actually in astrophysics and gamma ray astronomy at the University of Leeds in the UK. I also did some time in a university in France as well, in Paris, where I did some collaboration work there. But I've been in the optics field for 16 years now. I started out in technical support and kind of worked my way up from there. So I got into field sales, then went to team leadership, and in 2016 I left the UK to basically spin out from the UK base ABR Optics in the US. And in 2021 I became one of the group directors for operations both in the UK and the US. So a little bit of information about how ABR interacts and collaborates with end users. So firstly, as I mentioned, we're a technical team, so we provide application-specific technical support for the products that we work with. There are a lot of manufacturers that, a lot of their focus is on making really good products. And our goal is to kind of bridge that gap between the really good product and the actual application that people are wanting to do. As I said, we hire scientifically trained individuals. So really the goal there is to be able to speak the same language, or at least be able to bridge that language. A lot of our team are physicists. We also have some chemists, and actually one of our best optics individuals is actually originally a geologist, but she picked up optics real fast. But the point being is that you kind of have to be in that world to really understand how that world operates. We actively try and offer a mix of sort of core everyday technologies, so that's really where the SEMROC range for us comes in. This is something that people need all the time for fluorescence imaging, but we also try and be disruptive and look at products that are going to be sort of the next generation of technology. And ultimately we understand that we don't operate in a vacuum, so that is where collaboration with researchers is really important with us. So I wanted to take a very quick and crude look at how technologies get developed. So here we have manufacturers, we have capabilities, end users, and applications. And the way we see it is the starting point for any new technological development kind of starts at either the manufacturer or the end user. So the manufacturer might develop a capability, right? And that might get seen by a scientist somewhere, and they would think, okay, that's a really cool capability. I could put that to use in my research, and then they'll pick that up. Alternatively, maybe an end user comes up with an application that actually doesn't have a technology developed yet. And that's when manufacturers have to move to develop in that direction. And it's kind of this cyclical flow that really drives a lot of technological advances in terms of where new products are coming from, where new capabilities are coming from. And if you talk to any of the companies out at the conference today, it's going to start one of those two ends. They either saw a need and tried to fulfill it, or they came up with a new technology and end users picked it up. And really, where AVR sits is kind of in the middle. We're not a manufacturer. We are, as I mentioned, we're a technical distributor. So where we sit is being able to spot those emerging applications and communicate that to the partners and the companies that we work with, and give them the heads up, right? We're seeing trends in, XYZ direction, or vice versa. We work with manufacturers, and they have this great capability, but they don't know where to put it. So really, it's our job to kind of help manage that. So some very quick examples of the kind of collaborations that we have with research groups across the US and Canada. Very simply, we have reference sites. So here, AVR might agree to some special terms. That might be, a discount or additional support or something like that. And in return, end users will give us honest feedback and point other users in that direction and say, okay, this is something that I'm working with. That's kind of the base level, simplest way of looking at it. We have had more formal demo sites. Again, we might agree some special terms and provide additional support. And in return, we would be able to host demos at that site, or ideally, because the US is a ridiculously large country, they would just be able to have people come and do demos at the site independently. So we would, if we have a user in one lab and there's another scientist in that department or that university that's also interested, we can say, hey, go talk to Professor X. There's also testing of products. So when we do develop new technology, sometimes we do want to be able to actually test them, or maybe we're moving in a direction where if there's unknowns involved. As an example for that, some of our adaptive optics, we've had national labs do power testing and power damage threshold testing on our kit. And the main driver of that is we don't have all the laser sources in the world. Sometimes we just need to go talk to someone who does and collaborate with them on that. In cases like that, the scientist would give us some honest feedback, usually some documentation that's pre-arranged in terms of how we're going to be testing things. And that gives us a really good feedback and the ability to say, yes, our technology can handle this, or our technology is well suited for this. And then there's good old-fashioned collaboration. There have been cases where we've worked with labs extensively. Maybe a project just needs more hand-holding, or they just need more guidance. This tends to be very informal. And in cases like that, it's really, it's nice when we get something back when we put in extra work, because we do want to collaborate with people. So in cases like this, we may get referenced on a paper, or provide a testimonial, or just share images with us that we can use. And that's gone all the way to being co-authored on thesis and things like that. So yeah, and that is it for me. Thank you.
All right, hello. Jim Chambers from UMass Amherst. So probably like everyone in the room here, when you were a 5-year-old kid in your backyard, you dreamed of being a core director or core staff or working for industry, right? Raise your hands. Yeah, I'm just kidding. So I figured I would start with like a little origin story. So I've been at UMass since 2008. I started in the chemistry department as an assistant professor. Things didn't work out, which is okay. And then someone said, hey, we just started this institute, and the state gave us $95 million, and we have a bunch of microscopes. Do you want to do this? And I said, sure, I'll do it for a couple of years. But looking back, like I love my job, and it's a lot of fun. So, it kind of helped me develop a different part of my brain than science, and that's what I like. So what I just want to do now is just go through kind of how my facility works, and I will then talk a little bit about the Nikon partnership that we have and how that came about and how it works. Okay. So there's a lot of details here, so I'm not going to go into everything, but I wanted to give you the real data on how it works. So we have 19 microscopes, I think very reasonable rates. My users don't think so, believe it or not. The usage, nothing is saturated with usage, which is fortunate. It's unfortunate for S10 grants. Intellectually, what we do is it's really just me and 2 part-time kind of adults, and then we have I have a number of undergrad interns that kind of fill in the gaps. So I know there was a session here on creative staffing, and I think this is what I do. So the undergrads basically do all the cleaning, as well as all the basic training, which saves me and my staff, adult staff, time to actually answer kind of bigger questions. We do dedicated imaging service. This is something we're still looking to develop more. It's very expensive, so people don't use it very much, but that's okay. I've also started doing some image analysis workshops, and the main reason for this was really, to help people do image analysis better. But what I discovered, if anyone's done any kind of marketing courses, like this thing called like the lost segment, right? It's the people who buy their own microscopes and think, I never need a core facility, right? So these workshops, it's interesting because they pull those people in intellectually. They still don't use my microscopes, which is fine, but they do come and learn, right? And they then realize we're experts. So it's a good strategy, I think. As far as users, we have about 350 active users every year. This is kind of just the workflow. We use Salesforce to onboard people, which is plugged into our PeopleSoft system, as well as our new core instance. First training is done by staff, and then I basically prompt with questions later. How's it going? We noticed you got trained and used it twice and then disappeared for a month. Is everything okay? Are you alive? Revenue breakdown. So by far the biggest chunk of the pie comes from microscope rental, 85%. 10% from intellectual support. So these are the workshops, maybe dedicated imaging and things like that. Oh, and then 5% is service imaging. So the service line is something we're still trying to develop. Where we are at UMass Amherst, we're 90 minutes from Boston. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere, to be perfectly honest, which, as far as getting industry partners in, that's been tricky, unless they can send their samples. So that's one thing we're developing. But being in the middle of nowhere, we're kind of at the crossroads between kind of upstate New York, Boston, New York, and Vermont, Manhattan and Vermont, is actually beneficial, and I think that's one of the things Nikon is able to leverage with my site. So as far as vendor relationships, so the big one is with Nikon. So we're a Nikon Center of Excellence. I would love to tell you how that developed, but I can't because I wasn't really part of it. So I was still wrapping up my faculty career when all the backroom conversations were happening. So when I took the job, they said, here's the lab, it's a huge room. Here's a stack of POs that we purchased. And there's gonna be 42 pallets of microscopes showing up next week. And so I was like, oh, great. But just to give you kind of some details, and we'll go into more details later, we basically provide Nikon beta testing, of software and hardware, and demos of new systems. So again, this goes back to our location. Because we don't have saturated usage of a lot of the microscopes, there's kind of a lot of bandwidth, which when Nikon wants to visit and show something, it doesn't really affect my users, right? I can easily book 3 hours next week, and it's not going to hurt anyone. So it makes it very easy. We also provide advanced feedback on the user experience, on software modules. And basically the main facility is essentially a showroom for Nikon, right? You can walk in there and I own essentially everything they sell. So, and it's good, I love it. And they provide a lot of benefits, but really the biggest one by far is the on-call support. There's literally a person from Nikon that lives in Amherst, and that's crazy, because there's no reason to be there, except for UMass. So I can text him and he'll say, oh, I'll pop over in 30 minutes. It's amazing. We also, we're trying to develop relationships with funders. So the MLSC is our big state funder. They've purchased most of the microscopes. We're trying to formalize something with them, and then we also have some NIH-funded microscopes as well. I am working on developing a better relationship with the Alumni Foundation, or the foundation for UMass, to get more alumni buy-in. And I could tell a story, but I'm going to try to keep it short here because I have no idea when I started. But basically, looking towards alumni for endowments or funding fellowships, and this is something that I know at UMass we need to do more of, but I feel like as a core facilities, it's something that could be tapped as well. How am I in time? Do you know?
You have about 3 more minutes.
Okay, great. Perfect. So all the microscopes are in a kind of a brand new building. Well, it was brand new, 8 years ago. The main room was designed for 6 microscopes, but it has 11 already. And we have adjacent space where there's a few more. And then I've had to expand into other, like 4 different independent little closets and rooms around the building just to make it work. All the microscopes, all the computers are on basically the university IT system, which has been great. And our new core instance, which we call a quorum, basically handles all the financial accounts, instrument access, even safety requirements, and of course reservations and whatnot. So you maybe have noticed, right, there's 2 people, really, it's like me and some undergrads, essentially, that are there. So how do I make it work without being completely inundated with questions? So we're a very strong advocate of self-help and solo usage. So at training, we make it very clear that no one's going to answer your questions after 5 p.m. or before 9 a.m. on weekdays. Like, we set that up right away. I never send emails to users. Everything is done through Microsoft Teams, which is a university-supported system, so everyone has an account. And in there, each microscope has its own channel with details on maybe changes or getting started things. And all users are encouraged to make use of that, and most of them do. And then we use that also for group chatting. If you have a specific question right now, you can ask it there. In addition, each computer gets a pop-up browser where the Nikon training site pops up, and they can kind of self-teach themselves some fundamentals or how to do certain things. And then we also use a chatbot that is customized for the facility, but also kind of has some fundamental knowledge as well. And then analysis workstations, this is probably where I spend most of my time. I won't go through all this, but basically we're moving to a centralized server model where everything is completely either virtual or remote desktop based. And we do a subscription model, which cuts down on a lot of accounting work. I will stop there.
Thank you.
Good morning, and I will try not to disrupt the whole thing by switching laptops. Okay, one. Oh, there is a thing here. All right. Oh, yeah. Okay. No? Yeah. All right. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank the chair for putting this together. I was very, very excited. I'm very rarely asked about what I'm going to discuss today, so I got super excited. Have tried to cram a lot of information in the slides. I don't have a lot of time, but it's being recorded. Happy to share the deck, happy to discuss. I want to thank ABRF for 5 days a year. We're all together, which is absolutely awesome. And thank you for waking up early and being here today. So I hope I'll make it worth your time. Very quickly, apart from my job as a PI, I'm directing the Spatial Technologies Unit, which is a little bit different as a center. That's why we call it like a center of excellence. It's practically a core facility, but it has a wider mandate. When we established, first of all, it was established as a spatial and single cell core solidly 4 years ago, which was a very bold experiment back then. And we had what we call a quadruple mandate. This slide is from like the very first slide deck we ever did, to provide democratized access to technology to everybody, internal academic, external academic, startup, biotech, pharma, training and education that spans from graduate student or researchers, but also VCs, investors, physicians, decision makers, just because spatial is changing and will continue to change a lot of things for a lot of people, and they need to discuss these things. Also innovation, entrepreneurship. We have a specific track for that, support of generation of IP, spin-offs, spin-outs, support large companies, generate additional IP, expand their IP portfolio, and so forth. And then how we can bring spatial technologies into the clinical care. So I will discuss a little bit 1 and 3. Very rarely I'm discussing 3, like never. So very excited about that. This is our pipeline. We're full service. So there is no direct access to the equipment. Very, very rarely, for very exceptional occasions where we know they have been exceptionally trained, just because we rely on these instruments every single day. And we have a very standard pathway. We start with a consultation, we match the needs, we do the project start. We have specific criteria when the project actually starts, and we start the clock. And then we have the production pipeline. We have services where we have productized them, which means they're very robust, almost fully automated. They always run, even for spatial is something we're very proud of. And for single cell, and they can be from simple things to difficult things. And for instance, our single nuclei sequencing, even from FFPE, is production grade. So we know it will work almost every single time. And then we provide either the raw data, but most of our clients go with the data analysis. So we do all the analysis for them, and then we provide figure 1 to 3 and long-term support. But we have also what we call the research grade pathway. For instance, you might want to do a xenium and then, I don't know, H&E, multiplex immunofluorescence on the same slide, and then do an H&E and then a Visium. We will work with you to do that. But that we cannot bring it to the same level of service as everything else. If you go, now we work, we're a cost recovery center, so we have to break even at the end of the year. We're not subsidized in any way, and we try to work almost equally with industry and academia. And if you see the pathways, this is the industry pathway, this is the academic pathway. They're very similar. Like if you go 30,000 foot overview, okay, the contracting is a bit different, and the reporting is a little bit different, but under the hood, they're vastly different. So, and I will explain a little bit what. So this is our data production pipeline. After consultation, we start with fresh, frozen, or FFP, and we generate single cell, single nucleide from all 3. But we also can process tissue, make TMAs. We use robotics for multiple of our assays, and then we either generate 8 antibodies plus DAPI, or 100 antibodies plus DAPI, or 500 genes, but actually 5,000 for the xenium now. And I think Microscopy is graduating to 1,000. Thousands of genes or hundreds of antibodies with GEMX, and then whole transcriptome with Visium. We do direct placement, version 2, and HD. But what are our interactions with industry? So I have it at an angle, so I'll be looking there. Most of the work we do with industry, I would say 70%, is standard service provision. A company comes, we do the consultation, we pass them through the standard pathway. What are the main differences is you work with the master service agreement and then with SOWs, with statements of work. We do a lot of early access that was mentioned by our colleagues as well. It can be a technology access program. Usually you send things out. It can be a beta testing, or it can be instrument placement or direct placement. There has many flavors to that. It can be a permanent placement or loaner of an instrument, and also it can be a collaborative effort. Collaborative efforts are different because you don't work through the standard channels. You do potentially an RSA, and there can be opportunities for joint IP generation. So there we have worked across the whole spectrum. And okay, how do they start? That's potentially one of the questions we get asked, actually. Word of mouth is very important. If you work, with somebody, there's a lot of mobility, at least in the Massachusetts area, between companies, and acquisitions, and people move around. So if you have 2 or 3 clients that are happy, they have 5 or 10 people. These 5 or 10 people will move to different places after 2 or 3 years. So there is this critical mass of people that have been happy with your services. Vendor liaison, you work with 5 or 10 different vendors. And these vendors might say, I know a facility, you're an industry, you're a company or a biotech, and you want to test drive our products, but I have a facility that works with industry, that has the contracting infrastructure, has a reporting required, has the auditing capabilities, has everything required for you to work. It will be very easy for you to work with, so why don't you try our products there? And if you like them, you buy an instrument or you do whatever you want. So we're de-risking that process for the vendors, and they like that. There are biotech and industry associations where you can promote your services. There are state listings. MLSC was mentioned, for instance, previously. The Mass Life Sciences, they have a list of the instrumentation across the state, and they can be searched. Outreach activities, you could actually do specific activities for industry, and so forth. And then we start, almost everything starts like a standard consultation, apart from, so I would break it into, if they come for a service, you start with a consultation. For everything else on that list, from early access to everything down, usually we start with a CDA and DA so we can talk openly. And often we go beyond service provision, and that I will discuss in a bit. So service provision to industry clients, I will start with the end. It cannot be an afterthought. I'm a good facility and pharma will come. Yes, it can happen. But if you want this to be a major part of your clientele, it has to have an investment as you invest for your academic clients. So the first one is where 90% of all efforts to work with an academic core die. Contracting. We learned the hard way. It took months. We lost very important industry clients, and we thought, we have to sit down and do the work, and we did the work. It took years. But now we can do a CDA within 50 minutes, and we can put an MSA within 5 days. And that is something we advertised when we started the discussion. If we like each other and you like this project, in an hour we'll have a CDA, we can discuss details. By Friday, we will have the agreement in, and you can ship samples next Monday. And that is not something easy to do. You need buy-in from legal, res ops, your institution. You have to rewrite your MSA from scratch. You have to have many companies vet you, so they can ask your SOPs of SOPs, your SOPs for training, for how you ascertain that training has happened, how they have learned what the training is certified that happened, and a lot of things like that. They can ask CVs, they can ask everything. So if you have everything ready in a package, oh, you want to vet us, take it. Or 50 pages about your data handling capabilities and how you protect information and backups in different continents and stuff like that. So it needs a lot of groundwork. And then a big chunk is production grade services. I will be discussing this a little bit more in the afternoon, how you can render these research grade tools into production. Provenance auditing, which versions, which kit, which lot, which person, which day, which hour, because they might want to move to an FDA or something in the future, or file for something, and they might ask you, okay, I want all these logs, and then you freak out. So it's good to have it in your SOP, so you're supportive, and you can mention this. Certifications and accreditations are very important in some fields. Spatial is not there yet, but it's moving, so we want to be proactive. If you're doing genomics, WGS, or germline, you might need multiple accreditations, for instance. In other fields, you can, GLP, GMP, ISO, CLIA, depending on what your core is doing, might be required. Your front office, you need people that speak industry language, and you also need project managers that handhold the project if it's very big and complicated, and sites sending you samples from clinical trials from abroad, from multi-center study. Reporting can be different and tailored, and the data sharing process, again, it cannot be an afterthought. We're a medical center. We have 55 firewalls, and so nobody can get anything from us. Companies have 1,055 firewalls, and you can not put anything, even on their cloud. So you need to have a demilitarized zone. We have a DMZ with 20 different ways to share data. So we tell them which of these 20 work for you. They pick one with an answer, 5,000-page questionnaire about its security, and we place the data there. Early access, that's something we always do, and everybody I think here does. Outsourcing, you send samples, you get data. It's a low investment. There is investment because you work on that data, you evaluate, your computational biologist works with you, you think about it. But it does not capture how, if you take this assay or put this instrument in, how it will behave in the real world. In-house deployment, let's say you're bringing in an instrument or an assay, that can be a medium to high investment, and there's a cost to it. They give me free instrument for a year. It's not free. You have to do training, your personnel, it will disrupt your workflows. IT, you'll have to work with your IT, how it will connect it to the network space. And then you have to work on the data, the process, streamline it, add it to your workflow. It's very representative of what will happen in the real world, but it's, and sometimes it's often time constrained. They tell you 2 months to test it. It might take you a month to start it, so this needs a little bit of thought. Investment can and should be covered. So if I'm sending samples and you tell me you'll pay for that, but I will also then need a month of analyzing that, how can I offset this? Or if I put the instrument in for 3 months and I have to run and my people will be disrupted, what will be the benefit? You need to weigh these things. It's part of our mandate, so we have to do it, but we're very selective on when it actually makes sense to do it. Collaborative projects, these are different. These are rare for cores, and we're very happy we do these. These are usually through an RSA, Research Service Agreement. So there is, for instance, a company comes and says, I have a new assay, and I want to make products with this assay, or new panels, or things like that. Why don't we co-develop something? Or I want to do a research project with it, and we co-publish. This is a collaboration. It's not a service. It's a different type of agreement. It could involve tech dev or alpha testing. It involves you as a scientist, not as a core. I mean, same person, different brain sections was mentioned, previously. You could have shared IP. I have some simple examples, like company comes, has the instrument, and says, why don't we run it, and you tell us what you like, what you didn't like, and we'll change it, their IP. But we design, for instance, a panel, and we reach out to a company and say, you have this new instrument, and we think this oncology panel will be great for your instrument. Why don't we collaborate and make this a product? Maybe your IP or shared IP. Or, I like this instrument, and I think you could do very cool things with this instrument you have never thought about. Just because you have these optics and these microfluidics, I think we can repurpose it for X. This can be, shared IP, industry IP, depending. 1 minute, okay. They often cover FTE and reagent costs, and they can have different indirect rates depending on what kind of recipe you have chose there. But also your TVO is key to that. Now it's TVO, it's not ResOps anymore. So finally, our experience working with industry cannot be an afterthought. It's a significant investment. You do it consciously if you want to do it right and you want them to be happy and come back again. Takes time, effort, funds. You have to have a track for that. It has added a lot of contracting, reporting, quality assurance, quality metrics, KPIs, as we work. But I think, and it has put a lot of our focus on the production, just because that's what we usually do with industry. But I sincerely believe it has benefited greatly our academic clients because there is much better capture of everything. The products are more robust, the services are more robust, people are more, they understand very well how the institution works for many things. So yeah. Shout out to the STU and the people there. This is our link. We're always open, super collaborative, always hiring if you know anybody who wants to dive into these things. And yeah, once more, thank you for the invitation.
Great, thank you. Alrighty, so now it's your turn to ask questions. I had some kind of just goals. So I think we can all see now that there are, we can all appreciate there are many different ways that cores and industry can collaborate or work together. Hopefully some of these questions will help you to understand more how these relationships work and how they're formed. And I hope that you can gain some confidence to realize what your core or what your company has to offer as a partnership. And the main thing that I hope that you feel that you'll at least, I can't promise to level the playing field, but at least you'll know how to get onto the field. And I think that that's kind of the main thing that I want people to be able to take away from here. So ask questions. Oh, and the other thing is, if you don't ask questions, we have questions to ask you. So it's in your benefit to come up with some really good questions.
Right, so I'm Ben Abrams, and I run an imaging core at University of California, Santa Cruz. I'm kind of curious in these contexts where you're getting these demo instruments, quote unquote, free from the vendors. How do you integrate those with the rest of your instruments? Because I presume maybe you're not charging for the demo instruments, but that can really affect your bottom line if they start attracting users and pulling them off your other instruments. I'm just kind of wondering how you navigate that.
Do you want to start with that one, Chip?
Yeah, no. Oh, this one.
Okay, can you hear me now? So at least in my facility, the demos never last very, very long. So, maybe if it's a big install, they'll try to maybe leave it there for a month or so. Especially if they can parade other potential clients through, from Yale or Harvard, or other places, that are at least regionally nearby. Like, it's worth a day trip to go and spend time on a new instrument. For instance, one was, the SIM, A1R SIM, when Nikon first installed it. It's on this enormous table. It took days to install and get it checked out, so it wasn't a quick demo. But other ones like a Sora, it's maybe there for a week. We play with it, they pack it up, and then we decide later.
And I think that's been the same for me. Like, usually there's a finite amount of time. We've been working on building like a longer collaboration with ABR for some of their things, but that hasn't happened yet. So when it does, I'll let you know if it works out.
Just maybe a quick comment. I've heard also different approaches depending on the length. I've heard facilities, for instance, they add the depreciation because they would like to purchase something like that or the new version to that, so that evens things out. Or, and also, do you bring, that's a question, directly competitive demos to existing equipment, or there is some thought process behind,
So, yes, because we're a state institution, we have to, do things fairly. So we always will do demos of competitors, or I'll go to site visits for, equivalent instruments to check them out. So.
Thank you.
So I direct a fee-for-service core, and we do a lot of connection with industry. They call us, and I was so interested to hear about what you said about streamlining your legal contract situation. So every time that I get a call, it's industry, we don't have what you have. Here's 100 mice we need done next month or something like that. And I can understand that. They've developed a drug and they want me to test it. And our team is ready to go, except on the legal side of it. And so I was so interested to hear you said it took a lot of work and a lot of hard work. I always feel like we've already done the hard work. I have my IOCUC protocols, my EHS, situated. Our CVs are all updated. But it's still dragging their feet so badly. And what I was wondering is if you could give me some details when you said a lot of work on their part or your part, because I would love for them to say to us, here's why it's so slow happening. Here's what I need, or I don't know, like, where's the work supposed to happen? I feel like I've done it on my part, and it's still just such a stop codon.
Yeah, that's a very fair question. So for us, a lot of work was to understand how our institution functions. Each institution is different, and there can be specific parts that are the actual bottleneck. So for us, the bottleneck is BI is a very large organization, is the second largest employer in Massachusetts, and the legal team has probably thousands of requests per month, including my requests, review this contract. So we have an amazing group at ResOps, Research Operations, and Research Operations said, we'll work with you, and we will establish an MSA that is deconvolved from the SOW. I'm using a lot of acronyms, a master service agreement. Sure. That is deconvolved with what you're going to do. So you have one service agreement that can be signed once by that company, and then everything they want to do will be just a 2-pager. These are the things we want to do, sign it. That makes it very easy for them. And if the company uses our vetted service agreement and our vetted SOW template, of course they can redline things they like and they don't like, and we'll work with them. As long as it remains within a 20% change, or 15 or 10 or simple things, it will not go to legal. They have the authority to approve an SOW that has already been approved. If the change now is dramatic, I also mentioned this to companies, as long as you work with our MSA and you do not insist working with your template, as long as you use our CDA and you don't work with your CDA, or with our SOW, and it's vetted, it has passed from dozens of companies, there is nothing weird in there, very cookie cutter, we can have this in days. If you want to do it your way, it might take 3 to 6 months. We will do it, but it's up to you to choose the pathway. So they have to do some work as well.
Right. Okay.
We had companies that say, we will never accept anything but our own documents, and we're ready to accept a 6-month period for that, and it was 5.5 months. So.
Okay.
I was going to say, Pete, do you have a?
Yeah, I think the other thing to keep in mind is, if you're in an instance where a company is coming to you to use your service, it's kind of flip the script. You don't go to the supermarket and dictate your terms to the supermarket. That's not how that works. And it's the same when you guys, when people buy things from companies, you buy it usually under their terms. So, getting ahead of that, setting up the terms that you're comfortable with and saying, okay, these are our terms. In my experience, 9 times out of 10, companies are far more willing just to accept the terms of the service that they're paying for because they need to get stuff done. And the likelihood of it, needing to, as you said, there's often some redlining involved where, some terms aren't agreeable. Often they're throwaway terms anyway that are just in there just because, that's just the nature of terms and conditions. So, I think setting the terms of your service and deciding how you want to operate, and then if a company doesn't want to work with you on that basis, and that's fine, that's not your customer.
Yeah, right, okay.
And the other thing is just like to have thought about, because I never thought about these things. I think when when you guys wanted to bring equipment, you were like, "What's the insurance?" And I was like, "Insurance?" like so. If you think about these things ahead of time, at least you can have a process in place as opposed to just like kind of shrugging and being like, "We'll find out together," and that's going to obviously take a lot longer. Yes.
Yeah, another thing, part that helped us is a no strings attached agreement. There are some agreements that have terms that are very off-putting, like IP, and from the get-go. Having that cleared and have clear terms that as long as it's service provision from our line items, we do not claim any IP. And if there is IP, we have a different agreement for that. Right. But as long as we stick with this agreement, there is no IP, there is nothing, we'll not take your data, publish it, but we will use the experience of working with you to improve our services, to learn and potentially publish something independently, because we're an academic, we're not a CRO. We need to improve and communicate these things as we do today. So that keeps everybody happy, but has to be done before, months beforehand.
Thank you. Okay. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm Ramesh from MGB, who is competitor for Ioannis' BIDMC centers. So before I ask the question, I want to add a comment on what Ioannis said, which is, yes, we have all the documents ready and also established relationship with our OGC, tax department, and also insurance department. So therefore, if somebody asks for an insurance document, I have it ready. If somebody asks for any tax clarification, I have it ready. And then of course with the OGC, because you have to vet any service agreement. So that said, Ioannis, what fraction of your revenue, core revenue, is from for-profit industries?
Because that was our mandate from the get-go, I think we're 50% internal, 50% external, which is very difficult to keep at that level of intensity. And with that 50% external, I would say it depends from year to year, from 60-40 academics and industry, or 40-60 the opposite. I would say 30 to 40% industry.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Katia Solcher. I'm now in Virginia. I think this is a great opportunity for course to be involved in this aspect. In addition to your fee for service, you can do all those other things. And is there a way that ABRF can, help by having on the website a place where you can list, you can say, I would be willing to be a beta tester, So for me, I've been in those positions because I guess from our merit or visibility as a genomics core, and then the vendors come and they, do you want to test this and that? And it's been great in the past, it's a lot of work, but at the end of our testing, they left the machine in my core, which was fabulous. And very recently, I'm now involved in a collaborative project with 2 academia sites in Virginia and 1 company. And we had to pitch our ideas to the state, and then they gave us funding. And so you can also raise your salary and the salary for your staff, as well as really getting excited and being in a place where you actually are going to help develop new technologies that will be applicable for all courses. So there's a lot of rewards, to be participating on that. And what I would like to have, not just by chance you get contacted, but if we could have with ABRF, if we could provide a place where we could stimulate that, we could, make those partnerships more visible for all of us.
I think that's a great idea. We probably should have done like a seating thing where we had like industry partners sit on this side and then like core sit on this side, and then you guys could like mix later. I think that's a great idea, but I think the other part of this is a lot of these relationships are very informal. And sometimes I get contacted by a company and, Tim, cover your ears, and I'll just decide like, okay, I'm gonna let this in for free because I know that this is gonna give me something else like down the line. I know. So some of those relationships are very informal and they have to build slowly. But there are, I think, a lot of cores that are formalizing these relationships, and we could have some kind of, I'm sure if anybody wants to volunteer to do that, it would be very helpful. But yeah.
And I insist, it is fun for us because we are geeks, right? We like technology.
Yeah, no, it's
really
fun.
And now you're part of the developing something that could be disruptive.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot of fun.
It certainly is a lot of fun, and I think that's the thing that it can be a lot of work, and the other thing is like their timeline is not always your timeline, and that can be difficult when you're trying to juggle a lot of things. But at the end of the day, it can be a really fun experience, and I think that if both sides kind of keep that in mind as well, it's good.
To play devil's advocate on that, because there have been other groups that are sort of similar in operation to ABRF that have done similar things in the past. You can post, I'm open to demos or whatever. One of the dangers with that approach is, or one of the challenges with that approach is that often companies, we're not trolling these websites all the time. So the level of visibility can be limited. So with that said, I would just encourage you, if you want to try out a technology, is to reach out to the companies and give them and offer something that would be valuable to them in return for for doing those demos, and saying, yeah, I'm open to demos. I want to test it, and you know, these are the things that I can do. I could be a site in your local area, for example, because ultimately these things are about rapport. They're about relationships and knowing people and trusting people, and that's kind of how a lot of these agreements get started. Is someone meets someone who, you know, they're like-minded and, you know, they have the technical chops to be able to really test the technology. So, you know, it is very much a two-way street. So yeah, if you want to try something, reach out, tell people, I want to try it.
I think that especially like if you're in a situation where you're like, I don't believe that's going to work. I find if you say that to a company, they're like, it will work, and I'll show you. A lot of times it could just be something that you're interested in, and reach out to the company, like, how would this help me? And I would be interested in learning more. And a lot of times they're looking for people that are willing to take that time risk to like at least be able to tell other people, yeah, I used this and it wasn't terrible or whatever. So I think that can be.
We often refer to that as skin in the game, right? If you're willing to put in your time, companies will be willing to put in their efforts.
And just one little addition, so maybe the core marketplace would be a good place to post that, or to ask them.
Where they found me.
Maybe in the future they will.
So I don't know how to make core marketplace better for us to be visible.
Yeah. It seems kind of random, like the companies that will call sometimes and they're like, hey, I heard you have a confocal.
Yeah, also about the financial aspect of the investment. I mean, we receive exactly the same amount if it's an internal client, external academic, or a company. The overhead is being sequestered by the institution as the money flies, you know, in the air. So we get exactly, it's not that it's a more lucrative thing, even though it requires a larger investment, but it is a community of users, and they deserve to have access, you know, to expertise, capabilities, as, you know, everybody else. That's one. And the second is, I think, as I had in this last slide, I think it has made us a better facility, working with that level of intensity and attention to detail.
That's true. Yeah.
One general question. Do you think that your academic customers profit from all the additional requirements that you need to set up for company collaborations? Or do you have examples where the quality of service provision actually suffered for your academic customers due to resources being bound for the company collaborations?
That's a good question. So, Jim? Yeah.
I can definitely say that my internal customers, even if they don't know it, they benefit tremendously from both the Nikon partnership, but also any industry clients I get. And so our financial model is very different from yours. I get about twice as much per hour from industry, just the way our budgeting works at UMass. So it really helps me kind of offset the internal costs.
Yeah, so the major benefits, I mean, if that, first of all, they're not exposed to that contracting and reporting. Internal clients, for instance, they don't need to do anything. They just come and answer the emails and the forms we have, and that's it for them. However, let's say you have first of all, usually industry projects are large, which is easy for us to plan, to you know, break in different places. It's not, you know, somebody shows up with cells, like I sacrificed the mice by mistake, load them today, and you have to like find a way to do it or have a deadline tomorrow. So you can plan around and book your instruments the time you want it. It's your schedule. The second part is since these projects are large, they increase your reagent consumption, and that reagent consumption drops your reagent cost down. They also can support salaries, they support fancy instrumentation coming in. The overhead that we don't see goes to the institution, and the institution then can hire more people to support with our contracting, you know, or give us more space because it increases dollar density of indirects. So yeah, I'm pretty sure they benefit in so many ways, and I think it should be added in our KPIs how to track that thanks to this industry collaboration, we have this instrument now. Mm-hmm. We did projects that it was mentioned that after the collaboration, we have 2 instruments that stayed after collaboration. So these, we wouldn't have the funds to buy them. So there are many ways that the academics benefit from that.
And even in tangible ways, like when your system breaks and you know, the company guy or gal owes you a favor and you're like, I need this now, then you also can build up those relationships to call in your own types of favors when you may or may not want to.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, that came also, there are other intangible. We also act as a concierge service for academic collaborations. Let's say Pharma One comes and they have this, I don't know, whatever, brain neurodegenerative disease project or this, and they work with mice and they're working with something. We mentioned, there is a group here that does very similar things and they're very, very famous in what they do. If you're interested in their model or something, we can bring you into contact. And we have many collaborations that started because we know what the company is working on, we know what their PIs are working on, and we can just arrange for them to meet and greet.
Sure. Okay, yeah.
Hi, Jenny Schaefer, Vanderbilt Cell Imaging. I'm curious about, we have a Nikon Center of Excellence too, so I understand the formal legal agreements, but the more informal types like you're talking about, how do I negotiate what we can get if we host, we'll have other vendors come and want to host a demo and we're providing space and we're doing some of the marketing and we're bringing people to workshops, so how do I negotiate what we can get from that? How do I negotiate it and what can I negotiate?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is to say, what are we getting from this? Which is the hardest step, I think, in some ways. And I've definitely done that where I've just kind of said yes, and then I realized what did I get out of that? Absolutely nothing. And especially for informal agreements, a lot of times it's more about building the relationship. So if it's a company you're never going to see again, then charge them. So at least you get a couple $100 out of it. But if it's somebody that you're working with closely, I don't have a Nikon service center, right? But when my Nikon guy calls me and he's like, hey, I need to show this instrument to somebody, then I might be like, yeah, that's fine. And then when I text him at 6 a.m. and I'm like, I can't get this to work, then it's just building that relationship. But then we have other companies that just want to use our systems and we're just like, okay, well, just pay us or something. So I think that is a hard question. Do you guys have any more insight on that? Well, maybe
I guess really I was wondering if you have an example of a give and take market value. We host your instrument in my space for a week. Can you give me
something?
Yeah.
It's often an exercise in gain analysis and risk mitigation. You have to understand your worth as a core and understand the worth of your time. And you have to, take a really good subjective look at what looking at that technology would potentially gain your facility, right? So if it's a new microscope or if it's a new system, is demoing it, is hosting a demo going to potentially lead to you buying that system? And if that's the case, is there a way of you getting something out of that? That might be a discount, or that might be an extra year on the service contract for free, or something like that. It becomes very subjective, and as Kaye mentioned, it does really come down to rapport and that relationship. Understanding the nature of the company you work with. So a good example would be, often the companies that are more likely to be very giving tend to be the smaller companies, the startups, the ones that don't have built-in business by virtue of their existence. So for example, the big 4 microscope companies, they have center of excellences, but they don't need necessarily to go push the boat out and find that researcher and really convince them to test their technology. Their business is practically built in. But the smaller companies, the ones that are developing newer technologies, they're more likely to be a lot more giving. That might go as far as basically giving you the technology at cost because they know it's going to live in your facility and you're going to be able to maintain that relationship long term. So it is very much, weigh up your worth, weigh up your time, weigh up the gain that's involved, and then be straight and start that conversation with them and say, this is what we would need in order to make this worthwhile for us. Because if you're straight with a company or a manufacturer, the likelihood is they're going to be straight with you.
And the other thing is when they offer technology. So I was testing a piece of equipment that's something that I could test it once and tell you what happened, but that wouldn't really benefit me. It would be better if I could test it once a month for a year, and then I get the advantage of knowing exactly how that piece of equipment would benefit my core, and then they get the advantage of having a data set to be like, this works or this doesn't work, and then you can be like, oh, I just saved myself $10,000 because that did not work out or whatever. So there can be ways like that where you can just kind of build in like, okay, this doesn't help me, but what would help me is if we could do it this way. And sometimes it's just a matter of something like that.
Can I share something? It may not be applicable to your technology, but usually when I do that, I take this opportunity to also showcase all of my other service. So they may come for the demo, but they will stay for a service that they have never used before. So I'm always trying to, and then of course, like what you said, the vendors will provide maybe 25% off for the first users. And so there's, so this is the way I do it. I don't know if it works for you.
Yeah, I think it helps taking a step back. And we do demos and we work because it's part of our mandate, and we have to and give opportunities to as many as we can. Our bandwidth is not unlimited. So you have to take a step back and say, what would be the time and investment I need to do this? And sometimes you say, okay, let's do it because I'm building that relationship. Other times you will say, but at least I will need to cover these expenses or this time. Or you might say, or the company often comes and makes some suggestions. We've done this in the past, and we, for instance, have the ability, instead of leaving it for a week that was mentioned, I could do like a 6-month their placement. And you're thinking, okay, that could potentially be more beneficial to me. Or we could support, I have an example from a core next door, where they pay the person for a year to operate that instrument in order to help you users to get trained. You can be creative. You can just like bounce some ideas off them. How do you think about this? And actually, there might be some suggestions you never thought and might be very useful. But taking a step back and seeing where that fits in your vision and how your core works is very helpful.
Okay, I think we're getting short on time, but so yeah, go ahead, can you?
I just was going to make a couple of comments about visibility and put a plug in for the Midwest Association of Core Directors. They have a tool there. Somebody asked about if ABRF, where you can put your skill level in or what you can do. It's nice. I think they implemented that about 2 or 3 years ago. But also, I quickly wanted to say and comment to you about, our companies just Googling all the time. I frequently have industry people who call and say, I have Googled this skill 1 million times and nobody works with industry. But on my website, I have, we work with industry. So, up your website if you can, because I've literally had people say, we couldn't find anybody that looked like they would work with us, and I have it in bold letters. So if that's a problem getting your skill level out, they actually are Googling it, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of times they just Googled it and they're like, confocal.
Yeah. You got to own your own visibility to a certain degree, right?
Okay, so I think we're all going to be around for the rest of the day. Going to the thing tonight, maybe? No, not you. Find Peter early, but the rest of us will be around. So if you do have more questions and you want to ask them, feel free to do so. So I hope that does help a little bit. At least it kind of gives you a little bit of insight. Yeah.
Thank you all. I'm going to leave this for the next speaker.